I found the forged will in my attorney's briefcase, the same attorney who's been sleeping with my wife and poisoning my morning coffee for 18 months. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where it started, or where I thought it started. 3 months ago, I had everything. That's what people said anyway. Jonathan Pierce, heir to the Pierce Foundation, manager of an $8 million trust fund, owner of a 6-bedroom estate in the suburbs that my grandfather built in 1952. The kind of house with crown molding and original hardwood floors, the kind that gets featured in those historic homes magazines. My wife Victoria was beautiful, ambitious, 15 years younger than me. We'd been married for 5 years. No kids of our own, but that was okay. We had my niece, Sophia. Sophia came to live with us 2 years ago after her parents, my brother and his wife, died in a car accident. She was 14 then. Quiet kid. Kept to herself, mostly, always journaling or sketching in that purple diary she carried everywhere. I'd catch her watching me sometimes with this look I couldn't quite read. Concern, maybe. Or fear. I told myself it was grief. Losing your parents at 14, that kind of trauma doesn't just disappear. My father used to say, a house built on greed will collapse under the weight of its own lies. I thought he was being dramatic. Dad was like that, prone to sweeping statements about morality and character. He built the foundation to give back to the community, established the trust to ensure our family would always have the resources to do good work. Wealth is a responsibility, Jonathan, he'd tell me, not a right. I took that seriously. Every morning I'd wake up at 6, review grant applications over coffee, attend board meetings, visit the community centers we funded. I felt purposeful, useful. Victoria smiled as she poured my coffee, the same smile she'd given me every morning for 5 years. You're going to love the new program proposal, she'd say, setting the mug in front of me. She'd been my assistant at the foundation before we got married, so she understood the work, understood me, or so I thought. That morning, the morning everything started to crack, she sat across from me at our kitchen table, the one made of reclaimed oak, and folded her hands in a way that made me look up from my papers. I need to talk to you about something, Victoria said. Her voice had that careful quality, like she was approaching a skittish animal. It's about Lawrence Crawford, our family attorney. My father had hired him 20 years ago, and when Dad died, Lawrence stayed on to handle the estate, the trust, everything legal. He was at our house at least twice a week, reviewing documents, discussing tax strategies, updating the will. Victoria had started calling him Uncle Lawrence as a joke. He brought bagels on Sundays. What about Lawrence? I asked. His divorce is getting ugly. Victoria reached across the table, put her hand over mine. Karen's being vindictive. She's demanding full custody of the kids, and Lawrence is drowning. He's working overtime just to pay the legal fees, and he has no one to watch Ryan, Ethan, Olivia, and Nathan during the day. 4 kids. I'd met them exactly twice, at Foundation Christmas parties, where they'd hover near the dessert table and avoid eye contact. Ryan was 12, I think. The youngest Nathan couldn't have been more than 5. That's terrible, I said, and I meant it. Divorce is brutal, especially when kids are involved. Victoria leaned forward. I was thinking, what if they came here during the day? Just temporarily, like a daycare arrangement. Lawrence could drop them off in the morning, pick them up after work. It would only be for a few months until the custody situation stabilizes. I looked around our kitchen, big house, lots of empty rooms since Sophia kept to herself upstairs. I don't know, Victoria, 4 kids, that's a lot of... They've lost so much already, she said, and her eyes got that shine they got when she was about to cry. Their mother is turning them against their father. They need stability. They need to see that adults can be kind, that family doesn't abandon you when things get hard. There it was. The thing I couldn't argue with. Family doesn't abandon you. That was my whole philosophy, wasn't it? That's why Sophia lived with us. That's why I ran the foundation the way my father had, to be there for the community, to be the stable force. Okay, I said. Tell Lawrence we can help. Victoria stood up, came around the table, kissed the top of my head. You're a good man, Jonathan. This is why I love you. If you've ever been guilt-tripped into something that felt wrong, where kindness was weaponized against you, you know that sinking feeling. Leave a comment. I felt this. You're not alone. The next Monday, Lawrence's kids moved in. Well, not moved in exactly, but close enough. Ryan, Ethan, Olivia, Nathan, they arrived at 7 in the morning with backpacks and lunchboxes, and suddenly our house was full of noise. Kids arguing over the TV remote, kids leaving shoes in the hallway, Nathan crying because he missed his mom. Victoria was in her element. She'd set up the old playroom with toys, had a schedule printed out and taped to the refrigerator. Arts and crafts at 10, lunch at noon, outdoor time at 2. She even bought them matching water bottles with their names on them. As I watched the 4 kids carry boxes of toys into our home, Sophia came down the stairs. She stood at the landing staring at the chaos below. When I caught her eye, she walked over slowly, like she was approaching something dangerous. Uncle Jonathan, she whispered so quietly I almost didn't hear her. This is wrong. What do you mean? But Victoria called out, Sophia, sweetie, can you show Olivia where the bathroom is? And the moment passed. Sophia looked at Victoria, then back at me. She didn't say anything else, just turned and walked back upstairs, her purple diary clutched against her chest. I told myself I'd ask her about it later. I didn't. The first week was fine. Exhausting, but fine. The kids were loud, but manageable. Lawrence would drop them off, thank me profusely, and disappear until 6 p.m. You're a lifesaver, Jonathan. I don't know what I'd do without you and Victoria. It's what family does, I'd say. And I believed it. The second week, I started feeling off. It was subtle at first, a heaviness in my limbs when I woke up. Trouble focusing during board meetings. I'd be mid-sentence during a presentation and forget what I was saying. The foundation's CFO, Martin, actually stopped me once. Jonathan, are you feeling okay? You seem distracted. I'm fine, I said, just tired. The house has been busy. But it got worse. By the third week, I was exhausted all the time. I'd sleep 9 hours and wake up feeling like I'd been drugged. My memory was slipping. I'd forget appointments, lose my car keys, walk into a room and forget why I was there, and the coffee. The coffee tasted wrong. There was this bitter aftertaste, metallic almost, that lingered on my tongue. I think something's wrong with the coffee maker, I told Victoria one morning. She frowned, took a sip from her own mug. Tastes fine to me. Maybe you're getting sick. Maybe. She scheduled a doctor's appointment for me. Dr. Ramesh ran blood tests, checked my thyroid, did a full physical. Everything came back normal. Sometimes stress manifests physically, Dr. Ramesh said, sitting across from me in his office. You've taken on a lot recently. Your niece, now 4 additional children in your home. Caregiver fatigue is real, Jonathan. Have you considered therapy or maybe medication for anxiety? I looked at Victoria, who'd insisted on coming to the appointment with me. She nodded encouragingly. Maybe a low-dose anti-anxiety medication, Dr. Ramesh continued, just to take the edge off. He wrote me a prescription, lorazepam 0.0 milligrams as needed. The bitter taste in my morning coffee had become so normal, I'd stopped noticing it. Sophia stopped talking to me entirely. She'd leave for school early, come home late, disappear into her room. At dinner, the few times she actually came down for dinner, she'd sit at the far end of the table, earbuds in, picking at her food. Sophia, Victoria would say, voice tight, it's rude to wear earbuds at the table. Sophia would pull them out, say nothing, and stare at her plate. She's just adjusting, I'd tell Victoria later when we were alone. Teenagers are moody. But I didn't believe it. Something was wrong. I could feel it in the way Sophia looked at me, like she was waiting for something terrible to happen, like she was preparing for loss. One evening, I found her in the living room, sitting in the dark, writing in that purple diary. The house was quiet for once. Lawrence's kids were gone. Victoria was upstairs showering. "Hey, kiddo," I said, sitting down beside her. "You okay?" She looked up at me, and for a second I thought she might cry. "Uncle Jonathan," she said slowly, "if something happens to you, who takes care of me?" The question hit me like a punch. What? Nothing's going to happen to me, sweetheart. But if it did... Sophia. I put my arm around her, pulled her close. "Nothing's going to happen to me. I promise. I'm right here, okay? I'm not going anywhere." She pulled back, and her eyes were wet. "Promise me you'll be careful. Promise me." "Of course, I promise." But even as I said it, I felt a chill. Why was she asking me this? What did she know? When I asked if she was okay, she looked at Victoria, who'd appeared at the top of the stairs, then back at me. "Ask me again when we're alone." But we were never alone. Not anymore. It was a Tuesday afternoon, 4 weeks after Lawrence's kids had started their temporary arrangement, when everything changed. I was in my home office, reviewing a grant proposal for a new after-school program. My phone dinged, an email notification. I glanced at the screen. The sender was listed as Lawrence Crawford. But the email address was different. Not his law firm email, a Gmail account I didn't recognize. The subject line read, Phase 3 Timeline Updated Final Steps. My first thought was, wrong Jonathan. This must be meant for someone else. My second thought was, but it's addressed to Victoria. I should have closed it, should have respected her privacy. But something about that subject line, Phase 3, Timeline Updated, made my stomach turn. The subject line read, Phase 3, Timeline Updated, Final Steps. I clicked. The email was brief, just 3 sentences. V, confirming Phase 3 timeline for December. All pieces in position. See attached updated documentation for final review before execution. There was an attachment, a PDF. The file name was Pierce Trust Final Will. Tau between before DF. I opened it. The document loaded slowly, line by line. Last will and testament of Jonathan Michael Pierce. My name at the top, official letterhead from Crawford and Associates, dated November 2024, last month. I scrolled down to the beneficiaries section. Primary beneficiary, Victoria Ann Pierce, spouse, 60% of estate and trust assets. Secondary beneficiaries, equal distribution of remaining 40%, Ryan Thomas Crawford, stepson, Ethan James Crawford, stepson, Olivia Marie Crawford, stepdaughter, Nathan Alexander Crawford, stepson. I read it twice, then a third time. Ryan, Ethan, Olivia, Nathan, Lawrence's kids. Listed as my stepchildren, my beneficiaries, but I'd never adopted them. I'd never even met them before a month ago. And this document that looked perfect, official, with my signature at the bottom in blue ink. I'd never signed it. My hands were shaking. I stood up, walked to the bookshelf, moved aside the leather-bound collection of Dickens that no one ever read, and opened the safe hidden behind it. Inside, my father's watch, some cash, and the original will, the real will. The one I'd signed 3 years ago with Lawrence, sitting across from me, explaining each clause. I pulled it out, compared the 2 documents side by side. My name was spelled correctly in both. The formatting was nearly identical, but the beneficiary's original will, primary beneficiary, Sophia Marie Pierce, niece Ward, 80% of estate and trust assets. Secondary beneficiary, the Pierce Foundation, remaining 20%, forged will, primary beneficiary, Victoria Ann Pierce, spouse, 60%. Secondary, 4 children I'd never legally adopted, 40%. Sophia was gone, erased from my estate entirely. And in her place, 4 kids who'd been in my house for less than a month. My signature looked perfect. But I'd never signed this document, and it left everything to Victoria and 4 children I'd never adopted. I sat down, stood up, sat down again. My mind was racing, trying to find an explanation that made sense. A mistake? A draft Lawrence was working on? But why would he email it to Victoria with the subject line, Phase 3? Phase 3 of what? I looked at my coffee mug, still sitting on my desk. The bitter aftertaste, the exhaustion, the memory problems. Dr. Ramesh saying everything was normal. Victoria suggesting anxiety medication. The email sat open on my screen, glowing in the dim office. I read the signature line. L, not Lawrence, just L. And Victoria wasn't just Victoria in the email. She was V. I clicked back to Victoria's email inbox. I knew her password. We'd always been open about that kind of thing. And searched for messages from that Gmail address. 47 emails spanning back 6 months. I opened the oldest one. V, Phase 1 complete. Jay's trust in me is solid. Begin daycare setup next month. Victoria's response, confirmed, kids are perfect cover. No one questions helping children. I opened another. V, increase dosage gradually. Don't want him getting suspicious? Coffee works best. He drinks it every morning. Dosage. I opened another email, then another. My hands were numb. There were attachments, photos, screenshots of text messages between Victoria and Lawrence. One photo showed them together. Victoria sitting on Lawrence's lap, both of them smiling at the camera. The metadata said it was taken 8 months ago in our house, in our bedroom. Another attachment, a PDF of medical records. My medical records from Dr. Ramesh's office. But they'd been edited, handwritten notes in the margins. Patient exhibiting signs of early onset cognitive decline. Recommend psychiatric evaluation. I hadn't seen those notes. Dr. Ramesh had never mentioned cognitive decline. Another document, a life insurance policy in my name, $4 million. Beneficiary, Victoria Ann Pierce. I'd never signed up for this policy. The signature was mine. Perfect, flawless, forged. My vision blurred, the room tilted. How long? How long had this been happening? I clicked on the most recent email dated 3 days ago. V, timeline accelerated. Jay's symptoms progressing faster than expected. We can move to Phase 4, commitment proceedings, by January if needed, but natural causes still preferable. Less scrutiny. Continue current protocol. Once will is filed and insurance claim processed, we're clear. Victoria's response, understood. Kids are attached to the house already. Nathan keeps calling it our new home. Perfect. I closed the laptop. My wife, my attorney, our house full of children who weren't mine. This wasn't kindness. This wasn't temporary. This was a plan. They were going to kill me, or have me committed, and take everything. I looked at the forged will again, at my perfect signature, at the names of 4 children I barely knew, who would inherit millions from an estate they'd been brought into under false pretenses. And Sophia, God Sophia, she'd known. This is wrong, she'd whispered. Ask me again when we're alone. She'd been trying to warn me. I put both wills back in the safe, locked it, replaced the books. My heart was hammering so hard I thought I might pass out. I could hear Victoria upstairs, her footsteps moving across the bedroom floor. In 20 minutes, she'd come down and make dinner. She'd smile at me, pour me a glass of wine probably, something with a bitter aftertaste I wouldn't notice anymore. I had to think, had to plan. If I confronted her now with no proof beyond an email I'd accessed by invading her privacy, if I called the police with just this, would they even believe me? A man who'd been exhibiting anxiety and memory problems, accusing his younger wife and trusted attorney of conspiracy? No, I needed more. I needed evidence, real evidence, and I needed to pretend, starting right now, that I didn't know anything. I heard Victoria's voice from upstairs. Jonathan, dinner's almost ready. I stood up, forced my breathing to steady, and walked to the door. Coming, I called back. At dinner, Lawrence stopped by. He did that sometimes, joined us for meals. When he picked up the kids, he raised his glass of wine across the table. To family, he said, eyes meeting mine, however we define it. Victoria's eyes locked on mine. I forced a smile, raised my own glass. To family, I echoed, and I drank. The next 3 days were the longest of my life. I woke up Wednesday morning and Victoria was already in the kitchen, making coffee. The same ritual, the same smile. She set the mug in front of me, kissed my forehead, and said, "Don't forget, board meeting at 10. I looked at the coffee, the steam rising, the dark surface reflecting the overhead lights. Thanks, I said. I picked it up, brought it to my lips, and set it back down. Actually, I'm trying to cut back on caffeine, I said. Doctor's orders, the anxiety thing. Victoria's smile didn't falter, but something flickered in her eyes. Since when? Since yesterday. Dr. Ramesh called with some follow-up advice. Caffeine can make anxiety worse. Oh. She picked up the mug, dumped it in the sink. I'll make you herbal tea instead. That's okay. I'll just have water. I watched her face, watched the micro-adjustment, the recalibration. She was wondering if I suspected something, if I knew. You sure? She asked. Yeah, I'm good. She shrugged, turned back to the stove where she was making eggs. But her shoulders were tight. If you've ever had to pretend everything's fine while your world crumbles, while you sit across from someone who's trying to kill you and act like you don't know, you understand the kind of strength that takes. Every muscle in my body wanted to run. Every instinct screamed danger. But I forced myself to sit there, eat the egg she made, compliment the seasoning, and talk about the weather. Because I needed time. Time to gather evidence. Time to build a case. Time to protect Sophia. Lawrence's kids arrived at 7, same as always. Ryan, Ethan, Olivia, Nathan, backpacks and lunchboxes, trampling through the house like they owned it. Nathan had started calling our living room the playroom. Olivia asked Victoria if she could paint her bedroom a different color. Of course, sweetheart, Victoria said, running her hand through Olivia's hair. Any color you want. This is your home too. I watched from the kitchen doorway. Victoria caught me looking and smiled. That smile, the one I used to think meant love. That evening, Lawrence stopped by to pick up the kids. He was carrying his briefcase, the same leather briefcase I'd seen 1,000 times, the one with his initials embossed on the front. Jonathan, he said, setting it on the hallway table. Got a minute? I need your signature on some foundation documents. My heart stopped. Documents, signature. Sure, I said. He pulled out papers, legitimate ones this time, grant approval forms for the after-school program. I read every line twice, checked every clause. When I was certain they were real, I signed. Lawrence smiled. You're thorough today. Just being careful. That's good. Can't be too careful. He put the papers back in his briefcase, and as he did, I saw it, just for a second. Another folder inside labeled Pierce Estate, updated. At dinner, Lawrence raised his glass. To family, however we define it. Victoria's eyes locked on mine. I forced a smile, raised my own glass. To family, I said, and I watched them. The way they looked at each other across the table. The way Victoria's foot brushed against Lawrence's under the table. She thought I didn't notice, but I did. I noticed everything now. Lawrence left at 8. The kids were gone. Victoria went upstairs to take a shower, and I went to work. The kitchen was quiet, just the hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the clock on the wall. I started with the obvious places, the medicine cabinet, the pantry, nothing. Then I moved to the spice rack. Oregano, basil, thyme, paprika. Behind the oregano, pushed all the way to the back, where you'd never see it unless you were looking, 2 orange prescription bottles. I pulled them out. My hands were shaking. Both bottles had Victoria's name on the label, Victoria Ann Pierce. But the medications, Ambien, tea, betalamivir, Prescribed 3 months ago. The bottle was nearly empty. Lorazepam, 2 milligrams, prescribed 4 months ago. Also nearly empty. I did the math. 30 pills per bottle. If these were nearly empty and Victoria wasn't taking them herself, where had they gone? Into my food, into my coffee, for 18 months. I opened the drawer below the spice rack. Mortar and pestle, the one Victoria used for grinding fresh herbs, she said. I picked it up, looked inside. White residue, powder, clinging to the sides. I set the bottles back exactly where I'd found them, took photos with my phone, and closed the cabinet. I found them behind the oregano, 2 prescription bottles in Victoria's name, both nearly empty. My hands shook as I counted, enough to drug someone for 18 months. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay in bed next to Victoria, listening to her breathe, and thought, this woman is trying to kill me. This woman who I'd trusted with everything, who I'd married, who I'd let into my home and my life and my family, she was poisoning me. Systematically, methodically. How many mornings had I woken up feeling drugged? How many afternoons had I struggled to remember simple things, blame myself for being forgetful, stressed, anxious? It wasn't me. It was her. Thursday morning, Victoria slept in. I went to my office before she woke up and locked the door. Our home security system, I'd installed it 5 years ago. Top-of-the-line cameras covering every entrance, the kitchen, the living room, the hallways. The footage saved automatically to a cloud server, kept for 90 days before being deleted. I logged into the system, started scrolling back through the kitchen camera footage. November 29th, 6:47 a.m., Victoria in the kitchen making coffee. She poured water into the machine, measured out grounds, set a mug on the counter. Then she turned to the spice rack. The camera angle was perfect. I could see everything, and pulled out the orange bottles. She opened one, tapped 3 pills into the mortar and pestle, and crushed them. Then she scraped the powder into my coffee mug. She didn't rush, didn't look nervous, just efficient, practiced like she'd done it 1,000 times. I marked the video, kept scrolling. September 12th, 7:15 a.m., same routine. Pills into the mortar, powder into my coffee. August 3rd, 6:47 a.m., same thing. I went back further. July, June, May. 12 instances, 12 different dates where I could clearly see Victoria crushing pills and mixing them into my food or coffee. But October 29th, that one was different. October 29th, 6:52 a.m. Victoria crushed the pills, stirred the powder into my coffee, and then she looked up directly at the camera. She knew it was there. She'd always known. And she smiled. Not a nervous smile, not a guilty smile, a confident smile she wanted me to see, eventually, when it was too late, when I was dead or committed or so mentally gone that no one would believe me. August 3rd, 6:47 a.m. She crushed pills into my oatmeal. September 12th, 7:15 a.m., into my coffee. October 29th, she looked directly at the camera and smiled. I backed up all the footage to an external hard drive. 12 clips, 12 pieces of evidence. Then I kept searching the house. Friday afternoon, Victoria took Lawrence's kids to the park. She'd been doing that more often lately, taking them out, giving them experiences, building that mother-child bond, building the case that they were her family, her children. I waited until I saw her car pull out of the driveway, then went to my office. Lawrence had been using the desk in there sometimes when he came over to work on foundation business. He kept some files in the bottom drawer, or he used to. Now the drawer was locked. I broke it open. Small screwdriver, 2 minutes of work. Inside, folders, papers, a laptop charger, and underneath everything, taped to the bottom of the drawer, a phone. Not Lawrence's regular phone, a cheap flip phone, the kind you buy at a convenience store with cash. I turned it on. The text message history was extensive. Hundreds of messages between 2 contacts, labeled only as V and L. I scrolled through them. L, J, still showing symptoms. Dosage effective. V, good. Keep timeline on track. L, kids asking about moving in permanently. What do I tell them? V, tell them soon, once everything's finalized. L, phase 3, ready, will in place. Insurance policy filed, just need the event. V, natural causes, best, less scrutiny, keep protocol. L, agreed. Once J is committed or deceased, we file probate immediately. V, then we're free. I kept scrolling, further back. L, Karen's getting suspicious, need to accelerate timeline. V, handle Karen first, then we focus on JL, psychiatric hold papers filed. If she tries anything, we have her committed. Karen, Lawrence's ex-wife. The one Victoria said was being vindictive about the custody battle. I took photos of every message, every single one. Then I put the phone back exactly where I'd found it, taped it to the bottom of the drawer, closed everything up. My mind was racing. Karen. If they'd done this to her, tried to have her committed, gaslit her, destroyed her credibility, maybe she'd help me. Maybe she'd believe me. I found her number through the law firm directory. She was still listed as Lawrence's emergency contact, ironically. I called from my car, parked down the street from my own house. She answered on the third ring. Hello. Karen, you don't know me. My name is Jonathan Pierce. I know who you are. Her voice was sharp. You're Lawrence's client, the rich one with the foundation. Yes, I need to talk to you. It's urgent. About what? About what Lawrence and my wife did to you, and what they're trying to do to me. Silence. Then, where are you? We met at a coffee shop 40 minutes away. Karen was in her early 40s, blonde, tired looking. She had a manila folder with her, thick with papers. They tried to have me committed, she said before I'd even sat down. 8 months ago, Lawrence filed psychiatric hold documents claiming I was a danger to myself and the children. Said I was having delusions, paranoid episodes, making wild accusations about him having an affair. Were you making accusations? Yes, because he was having an affair with your wife. She pulled out her phone, showed me photos. Lawrence and Victoria, taken from a distance, holding hands, kissing in a parking lot, time-stamped 6 months ago. I hired a private investigator, Karen continued, got proof, but when I confronted Lawrence, he turned it around, said I was unstable, that I was seeing things that weren't there. He got our family doctor to sign off on a psychiatric evaluation. The doctor said I showed signs of paranoid personality disorder. But you don't. No, I don't. But once that evaluation was in the system, every judge we went before saw me as the crazy ex-wife. Lawrence got primary custody. I get supervised visits twice a month. Her hands were shaking. They destroyed me, Mr. Pierce. They took my children, my credibility, my life, and they did it methodically. I pulled out my phone, showed her the email, the forged will, the text messages from the burner phone. Her face went white. Oh my God, they're doing it to you too. I need your help, I said. I need someone who will believe me, someone who knows their playbook. She opened her folder. These are the psychiatric hold documents Lawrence filed on me. Look at the symptoms they claimed I had. I read through them. Anxiety, memory problems, confusion, paranoid ideation, difficulty concentrating. Now look at these, she said, pulling out more papers. These are medical records from your doctor. I got them through discovery in my custody case. Lawrence had them as evidence that I was making false claims about his character. The papers were my medical records from Dr. Ramesh, but there were handwritten notes I'd never seen. Patient exhibiting signs of early onset cognitive decline, mood swings, paranoid thoughts about spouse, recommend psychiatric evaluation. I never said any of that, I said. Dr. Ramesh never mentioned cognitive decline. Because he didn't write it. Look at the handwriting. Compare it to Lawrence's signature. I looked. The handwriting was similar. Very similar. They falsified your medical records, Karen said. Same thing they did to me. They build a paper trail. You're anxious, forgetful, paranoid. Then, when you start accusing them of conspiracy, they point to the records and say, see, he's not well. He needs help. And they have you committed, or worse. I thought about the life insurance policy, $4 million. Beneficiary, Victoria. Karen's voice dropped. If you'd called me 2 months later, I might be dead, Jonathan, or locked in a psychiatric facility, medicated into silence. They're very good at what they do. Have you ever found unexpected allies in your darkest moment? Share below. What do I do? I asked. You document everything, you record everything, and you don't let on that you know. She leaned forward. The second they realize you're onto them, they'll accelerate. They'll act. You need to get ahead of this. I nodded. I have security footage. I have the text messages. I have the forged will. That's good. That's a start. But you need more. You need witnesses. You need someone who can corroborate your mental state, someone they haven't gotten to yet. Sophia. My niece, I said. She's been acting strange. I think she knows something. Talk to her tonight and record the conversation. Karen handed me a card. This is my attorney. She specializes in cases like this: fraud, conspiracy, elder abuse. Call her. Tell her I sent you. Elder abuse? I'm only 44. Financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. That's what they're doing. It doesn't matter how old you are. She stood up. Be careful, Jonathan. They've been planning this for a long time. Don't underestimate them. That night I waited until Victoria went to bed. Then I knocked on Sophia's door. Can I come in? Silence. Then, okay. She was sitting on her bed, that purple diary open in her lap. When she saw me, she closed it quickly. Sophia, I said, I need you to tell me the truth. About Victoria. About what you've seen. Her eyes filled with tears. You believe me now? I believe you. I should have believed you weeks ago. She opened the diary. Her hands were shaking. I started writing everything down in March, 8 months ago. 2 weeks after I moved in, I saw Aunt Victoria put something in your coffee. At first I thought maybe it was sugar or cream, but the way she did it, when you weren't looking, like she was hiding it, I knew something was wrong. Why didn't you tell me? I tried. Her voice broke. I tried so many times, but she was always there, always watching, and I was scared. If I said something and you didn't believe me, what would happen? Would she hurt me? Would you send me away? I would never send you away. But I didn't know that. Not for sure. She opened to a page. The handwriting was shaky, like she'd been crying while she wrote. March 3rd, she read. Today, Aunt Victoria put something in Uncle Jonathan's food. She didn't see me watching. I don't know what to do. If I tell him and he doesn't believe me, I have nowhere to go. She flipped to another page. June 14th. Today, Uncle Jonathan forgot my birthday. He never forgets. Aunt Victoria said it's because he doesn't care anymore, but I saw her put pills in his coffee this morning. I'm scared. I'm so scared. If he dies, do I go back to foster care? Below the entry, she'd drawn a picture. A stick figure of me, with X's over my eyes. I thought you were going to die, she whispered. Every morning, I'd come downstairs and check to make sure you were still breathing. I was 16 years old, and I went to sleep every night, wondering if I'd wake up an orphan again. I pulled her into a hug. She sobbed against my shoulder. I'm so sorry, I said. I'm so sorry I didn't see it, but I see it now, and I'm going to fix this. She pulled back, wiped her eyes. I have more. I've been recording her on my phone. Recording? She pulled out her phone, opened the voice memo app. Whenever she talks to Mr. Crawford and thinks no one's listening, I've been recording since April. She played one. Victoria's voice, clear as day. Jonathan's symptoms are progressing faster than expected. We should be able to move to the next phase by December. Another recording. Lawrence's voice. Once the will is probated and the insurance pays out, we split everything 50-50. How many recordings do you have? 47. Some are just small things, her lying about where she's going or talking to the kids about moving in permanently, But some are, she paused. Some are bad, Uncle Jonathan, really bad. The entry was dated March 3rd, 2 weeks after she moved in. Aunt Victoria put something in Uncle Jonathan's food tonight. She didn't see me watching. Can you send all of those to me right now? Already done. I sent them to your email an hour ago. I was waiting for you to ask. Smart kid. Brave kid. Sophia, I need you to do something for me. I need you to keep acting normal. Don't let Victoria know that you've told me any of this. Can you do that? She nodded. I've been pretending for 8 months. I can pretend for a few more days. Good, because we're going to end this. Soon. The next morning, I called the attorney Karen had recommended, Margaret Chen, criminal defense and fraud specialist. We met in her office that afternoon. I brought everything, the security footage, the text messages, the forged will, Sophia's recordings, the pill bottles. I'd gone back and taken them, evidence bags and all. Karen came too with her own documentation. Margaret listened to everything, watched the videos, read the messages. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair. This is one of the most comprehensive conspiracies to commit fraud and attempted murder I've seen in 20 years of practice. Can we stop them? We can do better than stop them. We can send them to prison. She opened her laptop. But we need to be strategic. Right now, you have evidence of conspiracy, forgery, drugging, fraud. What we need is a confession or an attempt. An attempt? They're planning something, phase 4, according to the text messages. Commitment proceedings or natural causes. We need to catch them in the act. How? She smiled. We set a trap, and we make sure the police are watching when they spring it. Karen's voice cracked through the speaker. They did to him exactly what they did to me. If you called 2 months later, I might be dead. Jonathan, you need to act now. By Monday, the plan was in place. Margaret had contacted the district attorney, shown them the evidence. They agreed to move forward, conditional on catching Victoria and Lawrence in an overt act. We'd wear wires, set up a confrontation, get them to confess on tape. But we needed one more thing. Tuesday morning, I called Victoria into my office. I want to update my will, I said. I've been thinking, with the kids around so much and everything you've done for them, I want to make sure they're taken care of. All of them. Ryan, Ethan, Olivia, Nathan, and you, of course. Her eyes lit up. Jonathan, that's so generous. I want to do it this week. Can you call Lawrence? Have him draw up the papers? Of course, I'll call him right now. She left the office. I could hear her on the phone in the kitchen, voice excited. He wants to update the will. This week. It's happening, Lawrence. It's finally happening. Margaret was right. They couldn't resist. The trap was set. Wednesday evening, I'd invited Lawrence to dinner. A family dinner, I called it. Victoria had been thrilled. This is wonderful, she'd said, setting the table with our good china. The kids will be so excited. Ryan, Ethan, Olivia, Nathan, they were already here, of course. They'd been here every day for 2 months now. Nathan had started calling me Uncle Jonathan. Olivia had asked if she could bring friends over, since this is my house too. Victoria had made pot roast. Lawrence arrived at 6:30, briefcase in hand, dressed in one of his expensive suits. He hugged Victoria, held it a beat too long, then shook my hand. Jonathan, good to see you. Lawrence, thanks for coming. We sat down, 8 people around the table that used to seat 3. The kids chattered about school, about the new video game Victoria had bought them, about Christmas plans. Sophia sat at the far end, quiet, pushing food around her plate. She caught my eye once. I nodded slightly. Margaret Chen was outside in an unmarked van with 2 detectives and a prosecutor. They were listening to everything through the wire taped to my chest. Sophia had one too, hidden in her phone on the table. Lawrence poured wine for himself, Victoria, and me. He raised his glass. To family, he said, looking at me. However we define it. Victoria's eyes locked on mine, waiting. I raised my glass. Actually, before we toast, there's something I want to discuss. Oh? Lawrence set down his glass. I reached under my chair, pulled out 2 documents, and placed them on the table, side by side. I found something interesting last week, I said, on 2 versions of my will. This one, I pointed to the left document, is the one I signed 3 years ago. You were there, Lawrence. You witnessed my signature. Of course, Lawrence said. His smile didn't waver, but I saw his jaw tighten. And this one, I pointed to the right document, is dated November 2024, last month. It has my signature on it, perfect signature, but I never signed it. Silence. Victoria's face went pale. Jonathan, what are you... The beneficiaries are interesting too. I slid the forged will toward Lawrence. In this version, Victoria gets 60%, and your 4 children, Ryan, Ethan, Olivia, Nathan, they get the remaining 40%. Children I've never adopted. Children I barely know. Lawrence stood up slowly. Jonathan, if there's been some kind of mistake... Oh, there's been a mistake. Several, actually. I looked at Victoria. How long have you been drugging my coffee? Her mouth opened, closed. I don't know what you're talking about. Really? Because I found the pill bottles behind the oregano, Ambien and lorazepam, both in your name, both nearly empty. Those are mine. For my anxiety... You don't have anxiety, Victoria. You have a plan. I looked at Lawrence. Phase 3, right? That's what you called it in the email? Phase 3, timeline updated, final steps, execution in December. Lawrence's hand moved toward his briefcase. I think we should discuss this privately. I don't think so. I slid my phone across the table, pressed play on a video file. The security footage. August 3rd, 6:47 a.m. Victoria in our kitchen, crushing pills, stirring them into my oatmeal. Victoria stood up. That's not... You're taking it out of context. There are 11 more videos just like it, I said. Different dates, same routine. And my favorite, October 29th, where you look directly at the camera and smile. I slid the forged will across the table. You tell me, that's your signature, isn't it? The doorbell rang. Victoria's face drained of all color. Lawrence's hand froze halfway to his briefcase. Who is that? Victoria whispered. That, I said, standing up, would be the police. I walked to the front door and opened it. Detective Sarah Chen stepped inside, flanked by 2 uniformed officers. Mr. Pierce, she said, loud enough for everyone to hear, thank you for your cooperation. She walked into the dining room. Lawrence was still standing, but he'd gone rigid. Victoria had backed up against the wall. Victoria Ann Pierce, Detective Chen said, Lawrence Crawford, you're both under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, forgery, attempted murder, and conspiracy to commit murder. This is insane, Victoria said, voice rising. Jonathan, tell them this is a misunderstanding. We have security footage of you drugging your husband's food on 12 separate occasions, Detective Chen said. She nodded to one of the officers who pulled out handcuffs. We have text messages between you and Mr. Crawford detailing a plan to have Mr. Pierce committed or killed. We have a forged will with falsified signatures. We have testimony from Mr. Crawford's ex-wife regarding an identical pattern of behavior used against her. You'll never prove anything, Victoria screamed as the officer took her arm. Jonathan's been sick. He's paranoid. He's not thinking clearly. Detective Chen pulled out her tablet, held it up. August 3rd, 6:47 a.m. She pressed play. The video showed Victoria crushing pills into my oatmeal. Crystal clear, no ambiguity. We have 12 instances, Mrs. Pierce. Victoria's face crumpled. She looked at me, and for the first time I saw genuine fear. Jonathan, please, I love you. It wasn't supposed to... You tried to kill me, I said quietly. You poisoned me for 18 months. You forged my will. You tried to steal everything my father built, everything my family stood for, and you used children, your lover's children, as props in your scheme. The kids had nothing to do with this, Lawrence said, finally speaking. His voice was sharp, defensive. They're innocent. I know they are, I said. Which is why I made sure they wouldn't be here when you were arrested. Karen picked them up an hour ago. They're with their mother, where they should have been all along. Lawrence lunged at me. The officers caught him before he could take 2 steps, forced him against the wall, cuffed his hands behind his back. You self-righteous bastard, Lawrence spat. You think you're better than everyone because you inherited money. You didn't earn anything. And you tried to steal it. I stepped closer. You were my attorney. My father trusted you. I trusted you, and you conspired to murder me. As they led her to the police car, Victoria screamed, "You'll never prove anything." Detective Chen held up the security footage on her tablet. August 3rd, 6:47 a.m. We have 12 instances, Mrs. Pierce. The officers walked them out. Victoria was crying now, makeup running down her face. Lawrence was silent, jaw clenched, staring straight ahead. The doorbell camera captured everything. Victoria screaming. Lawrence being shoved into the back of a police car. Neighbors standing on their lawns watching. By morning, it would be all over the news. When they were gone, I sat down at the dining room table. Sophia came over, sat beside me. "Is it over?" she asked. "Not yet," I said, "but almost." The next 6 weeks were a blur of legal proceedings, depositions, and media attention. Local foundation head targeted in murder-for-hire scheme. Attorney and client's wife arrested in elaborate fraud case. The headlines were everywhere. Margaret Chen built the case methodically. The security footage was damning. 12 instances of Victoria drugging my food, clear as day. The text messages from the burner phone showed premeditation, conspiracy. The forged will had Lawrence's fingerprints on it, literally. He'd been careless, Karen Crawford testified. She told the court about Lawrence's pattern of behavior, how he'd falsified her medical records, tried to have her committed, turned their children against her. She showed the judge the psychiatric evaluation documents. The handwriting matched samples from Lawrence's office files. The forensic document analyst testified. Both my falsified medical records and Karen's psychiatric hold papers had been typed on the same computer, Lawrence's laptop from his law office. The toxicologist testified. My blood samples from Dr. Ramesh's office, samples I'd had drawn and preserved once I knew what was happening, showed levels of Ambien and lorazepam consistent with chronic exposure. Dr. Ramesh testified. He'd never written the notes about cognitive decline in my medical records. Someone had added them later, forged his signature. The IT forensic specialist testified. The metadata on the forged will showed it had been created 2 months before the signature date on Lawrence's personal computer. And Sophia testified. Yeah, that was the hardest day. Watching my 16-year-old niece walk to the witness stand, take the oath, sit down in front of a courtroom full of strangers and tell them how she'd lived in terror for 8 months. I watched Aunt Victoria put pills in Uncle Jonathan's food, she said, voice shaking but clear. I didn't know what to do. I was afraid. If I told him and he didn't believe me, I'd have nowhere to go. My parents were dead. Uncle Jonathan was all I had. And I watched him get sicker and sicker, and I thought... Her voice broke. I thought I was going to lose him, too. The prosecutor handed her a tissue. Did there come a time when you started documenting what you saw? Yes, in March. I started keeping a diary, writing down everything. I recorded conversations when Aunt Victoria thought I wasn't listening. I took photos of the pill bottles. I kept everything because I thought, if something happened to Uncle Jonathan, someone needed to know the truth. Can you read this entry for the court? The prosecutor handed her the diary, open to a specific page. Sophia's hands trembled as she held the book. June 14th. Today, Uncle Jonathan forgot my birthday. He never forgets. Aunt Victoria said it's because he doesn't care anymore, but I saw her put pills in his coffee this morning. I'm scared. I'm so scared. If he dies, do I go back to foster care? She looked up at me from the stand, tears streaming down her face. I was 16 years old, she said, voice barely above a whisper, and I went to sleep every night wondering if I'd wake up an orphan again because of you, Ms. Pierce. She turned to look at Victoria, sitting at the defense table. I lived in terror for 8 months. You didn't just try to kill my uncle. You tried to steal the only home I've ever known. If you believe in justice catching up eventually, leave a comment. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Victoria, conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, fraud, forgery, elder abuse. Lawrence, conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, forgery, abuse of attorney-client privilege, falsifying medical records. Sentencing came 3 weeks later. The courtroom was packed, press in the back rows. Karen sitting in the front with her children, she'd gotten full custody back after Lawrence's arrest. Margaret beside me, Sophia on my other side, holding my hand. The judge was a woman in her 60s, Judge Patricia Morrison. She'd presided over the entire trial with a stern, impartial demeanor. But when she read the victim impact statements, mine, Sophia's, Karen's, I saw her jaw tighten. Mrs. Pierce, she said, looking down at Victoria, stand, please. Victoria stood. She'd aged 10 years in 6 weeks. Her hair was graying, no makeup, orange prison jumpsuit. Judge Morrison removed her reading glasses, folded them deliberately. In 30 years on the bench, I have rarely encountered a case that shocks the conscience as thoroughly as this one. The level of premeditation, the systematic nature of the abuse, the cold calculation with which you attempted to murder your husband for financial gain, these actions represent not just criminal behavior, but a fundamental betrayal of the most basic human bonds of trust and love. She paused. You drugged your husband daily for 18 months. You forged legal documents. You manipulated vulnerable children, both your husband's niece and your lover's children, in service of your greed. You falsified medical records to lay the groundwork for either commitment proceedings or to explain away a suspicious death. And according to testimony, when your husband began to notice the effects of the drugging, you encouraged him to seek medical help, while simultaneously ensuring that medical help would only provide evidence for your narrative that he was mentally incompetent. Victoria was crying silently. The law provides guidelines for sentencing, Judge Morrison continued, but it also allows for judicial discretion in cases of exceptional cruelty. Mrs. Pierce, I hereby sentence you to 25 years in state prison without possibility of parole for the first 12 years. Additionally, you are ordered to pay full restitution to Mr. Pierce for all legal fees, medical expenses, and damages to his foundation's reputation. She turned to Lawrence. Mr. Crawford, stand. Lawrence stood. He'd maintained his composure throughout the trial, but I could see the cracks now. You were an officer of the court, Judge Morrison said. You held a position of profound trust, not just as an attorney, but as the longtime legal advisor to the Pierce family. You exploited that trust to commit fraud on a massive scale. You forged documents. You falsified medical records for both Mr. Pierce and your own ex-wife. You conspired to commit murder, and you did all of this while continuing to represent yourself as a trusted professional. She leaned forward. The betrayal of professional ethics combined with the severity of your crimes warrants the harshest possible sentence within the law. I hereby sentence you to 20 years in state prison. Additionally, I am referring your case to the State Bar Association for immediate disbarment. You will never practice law again in any jurisdiction. Lawrence's lawyer started to speak. Judge Morrison held up her hand. I'm not finished. Mr. Crawford, you used your own children as pawns in this scheme. While I don't believe the children had any knowledge of the conspiracy, the fact remains that you brought them into the Pierce home under false pretenses, encouraged them to form attachments, and plan to use those attachments to legitimize your claim on Mr. Pierce's estate. As a result, I am also recommending that the family court revisit custody arrangements. Mrs. Karen Crawford's petition for full custody is granted. Lawrence's face crumbled. The judge removed her glasses. 25 years without possibility of parole for the first 12. Epilogue. Short now 6 months later, the Pierce Foundation Spring Gala was always held in May in the gardens behind the estate. White tents, string lights, 200 donors and community members celebrating another year of grants and programs. I stood at the podium, looking out at the crowd, Sophia beside me in a blue dress she'd picked out herself. She looked happy, really happy. Not the scared, quiet girl from a year ago. "Thank you all for coming," I said into the microphone. This past year has been challenging. I think everyone here knows what happened. The story was hard to miss. A few uncomfortable laughs. But I want to talk about something more important than what was almost taken from me. I want to talk about what I found. I looked at Sophia. My father built this foundation on a principle that family is not just blood. It's choice. It's showing up. It's sacrifice. For a long time, I thought I understood that. But this year, I really learned it. Sophia squeezed my hand. 6 months ago, I changed my will. Some of you read about it in the papers. What you might not know is that I did it publicly, with witnesses, with my attorney, Margaret Chen, present. A new attorney, I should specify. More laughs, more genuine this time. Because I wanted everyone to know exactly what I was choosing and who. Margaret stepped forward with a leather-bound document. I opened it. The primary beneficiary of my estate, the Pierce Trust and this foundation, is Sophia Marie Pierce, my niece, my daughter in every way that matters. The crowd applauded. Sophia was crying, smiling. "Blood doesn't make family," I said. "What love does, choice does. Being there when everything falls apart, that makes family." I looked around the garden, at the donors who'd stood by the foundation through the scandal. At Karen Crawford standing near the back with her 4 kids, Lawrence's kids, who were healing now, back with their mother where they belonged. At Margaret, who'd fought for us. At Detective Chen, who'd believed me when she could have dismissed it as a domestic dispute. Well, this foundation was built on the idea that we take care of each other, not because we have to, because we choose to. And over this past year, I've been humbled by how many people chose to take care of me when I needed it most. I turned to the table behind me, where a large frame sat covered with a cloth. "Sophia created something for us," I said, "for the house, for the foundation, for what we're building together." Sophia pulled the cloth away. The painting showed our house, the Pierce estate, but reimagined. The foundation was strong, roots growing deep into the ground, but the structure above was open, welcoming, full of light. And around the house, figures stood in a circle. Not a biological family, a chosen family. Different ages, different faces, all holding hands. At the bottom, Sophia had painted words in careful script. "A house built on greed collapses, but a home built on love stands forever." My father's words, our words now. Share your found family story below. Blood doesn't always make family. Who's your Sophia? Who's your Jonathan? Let's celebrate the families we build, not just the ones we're born into. The crowd was silent for a moment, then applause, long and warm. I looked at Sophia. She looked at me. "Thank you," she whispered, "for choosing me." "Always," I said, "always." That night, after the gala ended and the guests went home, Sophia and I stood in the entrance hall. The space where Victoria's portrait used to hang was now filled with Sophia's painting. The house felt different, lighter, real. Do you think about her? Sophia asked. Aunt Victoria? Sometimes, I said. Mostly I think about how close I came to losing everything. Losing you. But you didn't. No, we didn't. She smiled, hugged me, and headed upstairs to bed. I stood there for a while longer, looking at the painting, a house with roots growing deep into solid ground. A home. Victoria had been right about one thing, I realized. This house did need children's laughter. It needed family dinners and noise and life. It just needed the right children, the right family, the one we chose.